Hello and welcome to Jill HB and Friends. I'm Jill Harvey Bush, and I think today's episode is going to be quite an interesting one, particularly when I tell you that my friend today has started his career as a theatre manager. He became a sound engineer. He worked for various film companies, the BBC. He was into licensing and merchandising. He made extreme sports films. He's done animation. And I can't wait to talk to because I came across their product via a friend. And it was a bit of a joke because her husband said to her, "Why are you giving Jill what looks like socks?" So I'm talking to Graham Hull today from Wool Pots, and I want to know more about Wool Pots, how it came to really be an item. So Graham, completely over to you for your story. So where did all this start? I gather it was two of you talking, and out came the idea.
Yeah, well, actually, it started with a friend of mine who's a lady farmer, and she's very funny and very robust, lady farmer, and she's always stomping around, having shouting about her sheep. She seems to shout the whole time, and whenever I get her say, "Oh, bloody sheep," and I go, "Well, what's wrong now?" And she said, "Oh, sheep do everything in their power to kill themselves. They're always escaping. They're always falling over. They're always falling in the river." And I said, "Well, why do you keep them then?" She went, "Because I love them." So I went, okay. And she said, "And then I've got to, shear them." And she said, "At the moment, it cost me £1.50 per sheep to shear." And she gets offered 75p for the fleece.
Terrible.
But well, the problem is that you have to take the fleece to the collection depot. So that's manpower and lorry and fuel. So that all adds to the cost. So that £1.50 suddenly becomes £2.50 or £3 once you've added in the cost of taking the fleeces to the collection depot. And you don't get paid the 75p then and there. They process the wool, and then they pay you a percentage of that 75p, and then once they sell it they pay you the balance, but the balance is very rarely
Mm.
75p, because they have to grade the wool. So she decided that it wasn't worth all the hassle. So I said to her, "So what do you do with all your wool then?" And she said, "I just put it in a pile in the field and burn
Yeah.
it." And I was like, "Oh, no, 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 you can't do that." I've got another company that makes biodegradable tree guards. And I was doing some research on it. And I read an article that said 500 million plastic plant pots are sent to landfill in the UK every year.
That's incredible.
And
That's
I know.
absolutely
And I was thinking,
incredible.
that is mind blowing, isn't
Any
it?
that I have, I
And I was,
reuse and reuse and reuse and reuse. But so many people don't, do
yeah,
they? They buy their little plants, their flowers particularly, or whatever, put it in, and oh, I've got all these pots, and off it goes to
yeah.
the tip.
When normally people put them in their sheds, and they have huge piles of
Mm.
pots in their sheds, and we call them the sheds of shame because everybody opens their shed door and goes, mm. I mean, it's surprising how the pots mound up. And we did a big research project with Lancaster University, and it takes about 450 years for a plastic pot to break down.
Good grief.
um, and I say break down, not degrade, because what happens is they break down into microplastics. And when they're in microplastics, they go into the soil, then they go into the watercourse, and then they go into the fish, and then they go into us,
Absolutely.
basically. So we are jam-packed with microplastics and actually nanoplastics as well. And the nanoplastics can get through our skin membranes, which is why recently they found there was an unborn child, and they were doing an amniocentesis on it, and they found nanoplastics in the blood of an
Ugh.
unborn child. So that kind of gives you an idea of the scale of the
And
problem.
even if we don't make anything else plastic, then there's still enough plastic around. We're too late, really. It's still coming into us to get
Yeah, I
rid of
mean,
those nanoplastics, from the washing machine when you hear about, fibers and
yeah,
everything that go down the drain. I'm very much
yeah,
into sustainability, so anybody who has listened to my podcast will know that, and I'm becoming more and more and more aware of it, about how to look after
yeah.
the environment. But there's just so much out there already. You just sort of go, where do we start with this?
I know, and that's part of the problem. I sat down and decided that we had to do something about this. I've known Tom for a very, very long time, who's my business partner. And so I made some prototype wall pots, And actually, I did make them from an old pair of woolen
Oh, well,
socks.
there you go.
So, because I thought they have to be um, completely natural and completely environmentally friendly, and they've got to be able to degrade. And so I made some prototypes, and I turned up to Tom's house with a bottle in hand and went, Tom, I've had this amazing idea. And he was like, oh yeah, here we go. Um, so I showed him them, and I showed him the plants that have been growing in them, and the plants were growing really
They
well,
do.
really strongly. And and he's like, well, actually, you've had some pretty terrible ideas over the years, but this is actually a really good one. I like this. So I said, yeah, I'm going to start a company. I'm going to make ball pots. I'm going to try and get rid of plastic from horticulture. And he said, well, that's quite a big,
Hmm.
challenge. And I said, well, I think we can do it. So we're helping farmers. We're helping find a home for unloved wool, and we're helping get rid of plastic from horticulture. It's as you were saying, people will go to a garden centre and they'll buy a couple of trays of plants, and they come home, plant the plants in their gardens. Their gardens look lovely, and then they've got two big plastic trays and probably 24 plastic plant pots, and they either put them in the shed to use again, which
Which
seldom
they usually
happens,
end up in
or
my
they sort of
shed from friends because they know I
yeah,
grow from seed. Because if you don't grow from
yeah,
seed, then people don't think to use what do they want the pots for? Unless they're
yeah.
potting on something smaller into something bigger.
It's funny. I was talking to a nursery. It's run as a charity just last week, and they put out a message saying, "Hey, if you've got any old pots, bring them to us, and we'll reuse them to they grow from
Hmm.
seed." And within a couple of weeks, they had 30,000 pots, and they had to say, "No, no, stop now, just stop," because they're a small charity, and they're like, "Oh my God, we had no idea that there'd be just such a huge avalanche." And they sent me photos, and I couldn't believe it. So I went up and saw them, and we took some photos for our Instagram, and just to show people, it was unbelievable, unbelievable. And everyone's sitting on these mountains of
And
pots.
that's just the people
Um,
that had seen the shout out, if you like, for the
yeah,
pots, let alone
yeah,
all the other people. And there are other ones that just go into, into the rubbish, so to speak. I mean, I'm
yeah,
forever picking up litter. I do a litter walk when I go out. I've got my litter picker, and it's amazing how you see, the plastic pots there just in the hedge or blowing down the road, and you just say, oh, for goodness sake, plastic everywhere. That,
yeah. It's quite interesting because if you think of plastic pots, they're effectively packaging.
yes,
Because if you think if you go to the supermarket and you buy your four apples, they come in a plastic tray with the plastic thing on
yes.
top. And when you get home, you take the top off and you put your apples, in a bowl, and then the tray the apples come in, and the top you throw away because it's packaging. Well, when you go to a garden centre and you buy your plants, you come home, you plant them, and the plastic pots they come in, you throw away. So it's just like packaging. So there are various taxes being introduced that are trying to address this. So suddenly there's a financial imperative, or financial consequences to companies. So strangely enough, people are paying more attention now because they realize that by using
Hmm.
plastic, there is
A
a
consequence.
financial consequence.
Absolutely.
I mean, there's a huge environmental consequence, but there's now a financial consequence. So now people are focusing a little more.
When you say you started, obviously, then how do you go about finding somewhere, I presume, to spin the wool? Because it's the unloved wool or the raw wool, as you say, that you
Yeah,
use. So how on earth do you go about finding somewhere that, unless you have those connections, that would then spin it for you or then make it, into the pot, the design that you've got?
yeah. Well, actually, it was quite tricky. We spoke to 46 mills in the UK to try and get what we needed.
Mm.
Um, and we went to a couple of factories. Like I say factories, but a couple of places, in the Midlands. I have to be a little careful what I say. and and Tom and I sort of rocked up in our jacket and tie. And when we walked in, half the workforce made a run for it because they thought we're from immigration. And we're like, oh my God, what's going on here? So we couldn't find, we really looked far and wide to find manufacturing, and we just couldn't find anyone in the UK. We initially found a factory in Egypt, but that's quite far away. So now we've moved our production into Portugal, and it's a small family-run factory who are very, very environmentally minded and very sort of their factory is very sustainable. They really make a big effort, and we thought, well, they've got the right, they've got the right
Sort
ideas,
of the
and
right
they fit in
ethos
with what
for
we're
you.
trying.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they fit in with what we're trying to do. And also, so yeah, we've opened an office in Holland
Okay.
because we're doing a lot of work with Gardeners World in Holland, and to ship wool pots from Portugal to the UK, then from UK to Holland. Yeah, since we left Europe, the paperwork is
Mind blowing.
mind blowing. So we can ship from our factory in Portugal to our fulfillment house in Holland with minimal paperwork, and then we only have to fill in one lot of paperwork for the stuff that comes in to us. And we found a very good source of British wool for our pots now. So the original ones were made from European wool. They were little white pots. Most people would see those. But now we've got lovely grey ones, and it's made from a mixture of different fleeces. And we've got somewhere that spins the yarn, and unfortunately we still have to ship the yarn to Portugal to make our pots. Eventually, we hope to have our own factory in the UK, but for the moment, that's that's the best that we can do. Every year we have we collect acorns and conkers and things like that, and we plant them. And so last year we planted 500 oak saplings to kind of offset our carbon footprint. And I've got a little balcony out. Well, it's quite a good sized balcony out here, and I've got loads of oak saplings and loads of horse chestnuts. We planted loads of conkers growing, so we'll plant another load of tree saplings this year as
Well,
well.
I've certainly got plenty of acorns because I see them springing up. I can see where the squirrels hide them. We have an ancient oak tree, sort of 350, 400-year-old tree. Well, it's
Wow,
in
amazing.
our neighbour's garden. I'm finding the little oak trees springing up in my raised beds at the moment. So that's where I know the
Yeah.
squirrels have been and hidden them. But that's a great idea
But
as
that's great.
well.
But that's great because I go around collecting little oak saplings as well. So if I like in our local park, if I see little saplings popping up, I went around and collected a whole load recently because I knew they were about to do the first mow of the year, and they just mow them all
Yeah.
down. So I also they all I take my dog out, and I with a trowel, and I dig up loads of these little saplings, and I put them in poo bags because that's all I had to carry. That's all I had to carry. And people look at me and go, "Wow, your dog has a problem." I'm like, "No, they're saplings. They're saplings."
What do you then do with the saplings?
I put them in wool pots.
And then, but then when they grow
I put them
up,
in wool pots,
where
and
are
then
you planting them?
when they get a bit on my friend's farm. So my
Full
lady
circle.
farmer friend Nikki, as a thank you to her, I go out and I plant all the saplings on her farm.
Wow.
And I've got my tree guard business, so I've got all the gear to protect the trees from being nibbled. It's from having loads of little saplings planted, and we benefit from offsetting our carbon
What a
footprint.
wonderful
So it
idea. And again, it's like
works very, very
it's
well.
sometimes it's joining the circle, isn't it, Graham? It's about knowing.
Yeah,
Like I happily pot up all my little saplings or go and plant them for somebody because that's just what I would enjoy doing. But then it's making the circle of, well, who would want that? And who would want
yeah,
them? Whereas you've already got the contacts with your lovely farmer friend to be able to
yeah,
go and do it. And I think we need to do more of that. And as you say, the wool pots, I couldn't believe how much quicker. So I did a little experiment. I put some seeds in wool pots and I put some seeds in my normal, recycled, nearly falling apart plastic pots. And I was amazed. And saying I'm not being paid for this. This is just me talking to you because I was so amazed at the difference in the way the seeds and the growth that I got in the wool pots as opposed to the plastic pots. And I think you saw recently, the roots come out. And it's so
Yeah.
easy then, particularly for some plants, which I'm discovering really don't like their roots being disturbed. And I gather, sweet corn, I heard from somebody, was one of those. And my sweet corn in the wool pots, I have to say, was probably twice the height of the ones in the normal
Yeah.
pots. And it was so easy just to take them outside and pop them into the garden, not disturbing the roots at all. And
Yeah.
yeah,
There is a little bit of science behind this. So we sent a whole lot of wool pots to the Eden Project.
okay.
Um, we met some of them, and we said we'll send you some. And we love the Eden Project. We think
Yeah.
they are brilliant and amazing. We absolutely love them. And so we sent them some wool pots, and then sort of 6 weeks later they emailed us and said, okay, so what's in the wool? We said, well, nothing. It's just wool. They went, no, look at this. The plants are twice the
Yeah.
size. What's going on? And we went, we've no idea. So they said, well, send us some more wool pots. We sent them, and they washed them, just to make doubly sure. They did this amazing test where they planted exactly the same
Mm,
seeds, but in a plastic pot, a terracotta, a wool pot, coir, bamboo, loo roll holders, all these.
mm.
I mean, everything you could imagine. And they gave them all exactly the same amount of water, and they treated them all exactly the same as a proper grown-up test. And they studied it, and what they came back and told us, because we're not
Mm.
scientists, we just want to save the world.
Me too.
And what they came back and told us was that because of the knit of a wool pot, it allows more oxygen through to the roots.
Ah.
So that promotes a stronger root growth, and that gives you a stronger plant growth. And they also said that what they noticed is that when you they had theirs in
Mm,
troughs. When you pour water in, the water will run through a plastic plant pot, but with a wool pot, it actually sucks the moisture up. It wicks the moisture up, and it retains it inside. So it actually retains moisture better. And it also insulates against hot and cold. So it actually retains moisture, which also benefits the growth of the plant. So they did this amazing research project for us, and we've been benefiting from it because we didn't know the science behind why wool pots work so well.
I mean, they do. Well, you heard me just say that I found exactly the
Yeah,
same, which is why I'm certainly
yeah.
going to be buying an awful lot more from you, and and giving to friends, because I think that's one way that it spreads. Is I have lots of friends and we
Yeah,
give gifts and that type of thing, and I know that they love it. I mean, for example, not that I don't like wine or anything, but if friends come to dinner, they now it's either bringing me some compost, or they're bringing me something for the garden, or I've got friends who've got a cafe, so consequently whenever they turn up comes 2 or 3 bags of coffee grounds, which I can stick in the
very
compost and
good.
everything. Another friend who was a tradesman who, when we refurbished our place, got to know I wanted all the dark cardboard, so he turns up with a delivery of cardboard, which I do no dig beds with now, and put into
Yeah,
the compost. And he's just like, this is amazing, Jim. Yes, it's
yeah,
amazing what you can do, but it's getting it out there. And again, you're saying it'd be lovely. So the wool is now British wool. Yes, that
yes,
you you-
yeah,
that you you managed to get, and you get that sort of spun. Who spins that for you then? So is there somewhere here that spins it, or does that
yeah,
right?
yeah. I mean, there are lots of mills in the UK, and there are a couple of really big ones, and there are lots of smaller ones. And a lot of the mills we spoke to, they are much smaller, and I mean, to say that they do vanity knitting is
Mm,
is is not really fair, because they're set up to deal with a certain number of
mm,
fleeces. So quite often you'll get your raw fleece, and you send it off, and it's scoured, and that's basically washing off all the dung and all the dirt and stuff. And then it's carded, so it's all stretched, all the fiber stretched into direction, and then it's turned into tops, then it's spun into yarn. And there are a number of companies that do that, and the smaller ones tend also offer dyeing, so they can dye the wool for you, and they can turn it into rugs and things like that, and and,
mm,
and blankets, which is great. But they can't cope with big, really big volumes. And in order to make wool pots work, we have to make,
Volumes.
in big volumes, because we're competing with a plastic plant pot that cost a few
Yeah.
pennies. But no one ever thinks of what happens to that pot after they finished with it. So there is a cost that there's a cost for collection, there's a cost for disposal, and no one ever factors that in. So they go, well, I can buy a plastic pot for 10p. Your wool pots a bit more expensive. I'm like, yeah, and you get your plastic pot and you throw it away. You don't have any thought to the
Yeah.
collection, disposal, and the costs involved in that. So
It's all about changing
and
the public's mindset, isn't it? And I think it's
yeah,
slowly, coming along. I've got a good friend, actually, client as well, and she's turning her business into becoming the green lawyer. So looking at terms and conditions, helping companies get green terms and conditions into their contracts with their suppliers, and that route. And I think it's that just getting the public to think a little bit more about
yeah.
where did this come from and where's it going?
And where's it
Yeah,
going is a really crucial one, because we're effectively we're just trying to change the mindset of an entire industry, and that whole industry has is so wedded to plastic, because plastic is a very convenient
of course it
material,
is.
and used in certain products. It's great. We don't want to get rid of plastic completely, because it's brilliant for certain things, but for plant pots, for example, there are other alternatives available, and we were talking to a company that grow herbs, and their sort of life cycle of the herbs is 40 days, and we're like, well, you should use wool pots. They went, oh, well, the customers won't want to have some grubby, dirty wooden pot. I went, well, actually, after 40 days, it still looks pretty good, as you know
Yes,
yourself. They still look, and if it does look slightly shabby, then we can call that's shabby chic or whatever. But you know that when you buy your herbs in a wool pot, that once you've cut your herbs and thrown the pot away, it's only gonna benefit, because it goes back to its natural state. It's mulched, it's composted, and once it's in the ground, it lasts sort of 7 weeks, and it's
just
worm food.
absolutely. And that's, I think, Andy, on the Urban Herbs. I know you listen to that, and
Yeah, yeah,
how
that's
he's
fascinating.
trying to change, and all that he is up against within the industry. And you kind of go, it's fascinating how there are so many struggles, and all you're trying to do is make things better and get people more engaged. And yet there's a lot that
Yeah.
works against you. And I mean, he sends it out, and there's people like Direct Plants, I think, with their trees and the plants that they send out, and you think, wow, well, there's so many different ways in which to do this. So have you found that I mean, what's been the biggest struggle, would you say, Graham? Just literally the
I mean,
marketing, or the
it's awareness raising, raising awareness, and also just proving to people that wool pots work. We're thrilled because we I got an email, a few weeks ago, and it was from Which
yeah,
magazine, and they went, congratulations, your wool pots have got 5-star Best Buy rating for best sustainable pot. I was like, bloody hell, it's a really massive, massive
that's
thing.
such a young company, because
And
as you said, I think before
yeah,
we hit record, you've been going about 18 months now.
we started in July, a year and a half ago. But and what's funny about Which is that we had absolutely no idea that they were running a test even. They go off and they buy all sorts of various different parts, and they actually do planting trials themselves. So it's not, that's kind of amazing for us. We were so excited. Yeah, and we've won various innovation awards, but so it's all about raising profile and raising awareness, and just proving that they all work. And once people have used them, they go, well, actually, this is really simple. And as you're saying, if you've got plants that don't like the roots being
Mm,
disturbed, the joy is you dig a hole and just stick the whole
that's
thing in.
exactly what I do.
Yeah, and if you leave the collar of the wool pot just slightly proud of the soil, it's a slug and snail deterrent as well. So that's because they don't like wool. So that's also a bit of a
Which is why I
win-win.
think you very nicely commented about asking the farmers, and I do have to do a post, which is why I'm on the hunt for any wool that the farmer is throwing away. I'd happily pay for it, to be honest, so that I
Yeah.
can put it all over my raised beds. And I know there's a lot of gardeners now starting to promote that. Then actually, if you
Yeah.
use wool as a mulch, then yeah, you do deter the slugs and the snails, etc., because they don't like the oils.
And
And it
it retains
retains the
moisture.
moisture, particularly with the way the climate is going. I went
Yeah.
to Toby Buckland's Garden Fest down here because I'm near Exeter, and there was the alpaca, the lady with the alpacas there. And again, it's amazing how you do that. And I happily bought a bag of I said to her, do you have any alpaca poo? She said, don't only be fresh, because again, it's that knowledge that you don't have to let it mature. You can use alpaca poo
Yeah.
straight away. But I bought a bag of old fleece or wool, to literally go on the ground, and I happily paid for that. So
Yeah. I'm sure that most farmers would embrace you if you came and bought some of their fleece, because it is a challenge getting rid of fleece, especially if you've only got a couple of
yes,
hundred sheep. That's a lot of wool, but not a lot if you're selling it, because you're dealing with people who've got thousands of sheep. So and it's yet again, it's just the inconvenience of having to take it to a collection depot when
now
you're
there's another
miles
idea
away
then,
from.
Graham. I might be joining you on a stand next to you selling the fleece for garden mulch, a slug and
Yeah.
snail deterrent. So you're doing, as
Yeah.
you say, it's getting it out there, and things like which are really helping. Are you doing most of the
Yeah.
shows? Do you do? I think you said you came up. Was it Hampton Court that you first?
Yeah, we launched at Hampton Court, and that was fascinating, because also what we love doing is we love talking to our customers and getting their feedback.
Mm-hmm.
So that was really, really good and really interesting. So we launched at Hampton Court, and we made 10,000 wool pots. We bundled them up into tens, and we sold the whole lot. And we thought, yes, we think there's definitely a business here. So then starting your own business, particularly in difficult times, it is a struggle, and you really rely on people, you're giving you advice and helping you. And at some point you're like, oh my God, the barriers that are put up for starting a new business is insane. You just to really dig deep and just try and think 10 steps ahead, because that's the challenge. And just when you think you've got a little bit of money in the bank, then suddenly you have to pay your year's worth of tax, but because you're a new company, you have to pay it
That's
ahead.
right.
So yeah, you have to
I'm
pay a year.
self-employed, so
Yeah,
yes.
a year's
It's like, hang on a minute, I'm paying
tax.
that there, and I'm paying ahead here, and then which
Yeah.
reminds me, come July there'll be another tax bill due as a self-employed person. You kind of
Yeah,
go,
and
oh gosh.
it doesn't seem it seems crazy that if you're trying to encourage people to start their own businesses, that it's so difficult, it's so complicated. But anyway, we've got a very good accountant, and he's really good news, and we go down and see him every so often, and take him to the local pub and buy him a few pints, and he gives us very good advice, certainly at the beginning of the evening.
That's why I laughed, and I thought, get the advice at the beginning of the evening and ignore it at the end. But you
Yeah,
were in the
yeah.
industry, you say, because you do the tree guard. So again, I presume you have biodegradable tree guards that you make.
Oh
Right?
yeah, I mean, but I'm not really in the industry. My background is I started as a stage manager
Oh,
in the theatre, and then I was a sound engineer, where I made some of the worst music known to
I'm
mankind.
also a sound engineer
Um,
trained from many years ago.
right.
But my husband's a
Well,
musician, so that explains that one.
oh
Yeah.
right, yeah. Well, I mean, I was involved with Glenn Medeiros. Nothing's going to change my love
Yeah.
for you. So, you either love me or hate me. And then I moved from there into a film company, Goldcrest
Oh,
Films,
yes, know them.
which we used to be make fantastic films.
Mm.
And then I left and went to work for the BBC, where I was part of the team who launched Teletubbies.
That
But
was
I
the
was on
age
the
group for my
license.
son. You're to
Yeah,
blame for that then.
yeah, I have a lot to be sorry for in my life. But I worked in the licensing and merchandising side, so product development. That's kind of
Yeah,
where it all came from. And then I eventually got very bored of the BBC, because it is quite
it
political
is.
there.
I've
No
coached. I've
surprise.
coached there. So between you and I, yes, I've done coached some
Yeah,
senior management there, and the
yeah. And
politics
if you
is
and if you're
huge.
and if you're a country boy and you like going out into
Mm.
the countryside and sort of normal country pursuits, you're not welcomed in the BBC.
Yes.
Is that probably how I best to put it? So then I left and then made extreme sports films for 3 years,
Oh, wow.
which was as crazy as it sounds, but it was quite interesting, quite fun. But after 3 years, I'd had enough um, of the lunacy, and then I went to work for a Canadian animation company, making
Hmm.
animation, but also doing all the licensing and merchandising, and then Nickelodeon, and I eventually ended up at Cartoon Network on their doing all their licensing and merchandising. So when it came to creating product, I had a lot of knowledge and experience in product
Right.
development. So I could do the tree guards with my team who I've worked with for years
Right.
while I was at Cartoon Network. So I phoned them up and went, I've got an idea. And I go, here we go, like all my friends do.
I'm glad
And
I'm not the
then
only one. Or even my husband, even saying, "Oh God, Mum, not another one." You know, like I've just said, "Oh, there's an idea. I could do that with a fleece," or "Oh, there's
yeah,
another idea." You know, oh God.
yeah,
And I say to people, "I'll come up with 20 million ideas. I don't expect them all to work, but one might."
one
So,
might, yeah. And then from there, from the tree guards came the wool pots and so yeah, it's some people they talk a good game, and I'm like, no, I've got to do this. I can see this as a really
mm,
really big issue, really big problem. I've got to try and do something about this. It's not worth sitting moaning about it. You've got to try and do something about it. And I guess that goes back to when I first moved up to London in the early 80s. I was living in a house with 5 other people, no garden. It was all a bit grim. So I needed to have my fix of
hmm.
greenery, and I came across this group called the Guerrilla Gardeners,
Oh
and they were
yes,
and they were brilliant. I mean, brilliant.
going and
And
doing any
they'd
little
seen,
urban space, weren't they? That they.
yeah, or we'd
Mm,
we'd we'd kind of renovate a
that's
roundabout
right.
and
Yeah.
and cut it up and plant it up, or we'd climb up onto people's roofs, and they had you'd see the overflow pipes just pouring out, and no one would ever fix it. So we'd climb up onto the roof and plant, a whole roof with flowers, because they've got this constant sort of watering. And so we do all those sort of things, and it was a very useful lesson that basically, if you wear a high vis vest, you can get away with anything.
Nobody questions
If
it.
we'd close down roads, oh, sorry, maintenance going on here while we did the roundabouts. It was just fantastic. So I guess that, I've always been, you know, a gardener of sorts. And when I was born in West Sussex, so we'd have gardens, and
Yeah.
you'd you'd plant your own vegetables. So it'd be very unusual to buy vegetables because you had them all in your garden.
I have this
Um,
conversation a lot, Graham. I'm similar sort of age, I would think, to you, but that everybody grew vegetables in their garden. Every neighbour, my mum, and everybody grew something. You know, if it was a few
yeah,
potatoes or a few tomatoes, or everybody's garden had fruit and veg up and down the street. It was
yeah.
just
And
something you did.
if you had a glut of one thing,
You shared it.
you'd trade with your neighbors. I'll swap you, courgettes for carrots or whatever.
Yeah,
You'd all, and you'd trade. And if you had a glut of raspberries, then you made raspberry
that's
jam.
right.
I mean, if you think plastic was only invented in the 1950s,
Mm,
so it hasn't really been with us for a very long time. Before then, we survived perfectly well with terracotta pots
mm,
and whatever we needed, we would use without, because you couldn't use plastic because it didn't
that's
exist.
right.
Or jam jars. We used to start our plants off in jam
That's
jars.
right. Yeah, the same with my
Um,
grandfather. I remember doing that.
yeah.
And he had an allotment. I'm sure it's to get away from my grandmother, though. So we used to go down and help him, you know, and it's amazing how all these years later, when I have come back, if you like, full circle to wanting to grow my own things, how there's some things in my head I think, and my husband saying, "How do you know to do that?" And I think, I don't know, how do you know to do this? I thought, oh, I know. It's because I've seen Grampy doing it. or
Yeah.
neighbors doing it when I was
Yeah.
younger. So I agree with you. We used to grow our own, and now it's kind of one of those you can get on your soapbox a bit, where I think everybody's covering over their gardens with flipping decking, and grow some veg,
Yeah.
stop, and the
Yeah.
same tomatoes. I make tomato jam, I make tomato ketchup. I make.
Yeah.
We've got passata coming out of our ear holes, a year supply.
I long for a glut of tomatoes. That would be a fabulous thing,
Oh, I certainly have that. Even the tradespeople who were here made me a lovely chopping board when they finished, because they were here through the summer, those sort of summer months. And I was picking a trugful every day out of the greenhouse here, and just used to put it on the worktop and, say to them, give them some bags and say, tomatoes, anyone? Go and help yourself. They're in the kitchen. So they made me a chopping board that's got tomatoes, anyone, 2021 when they were here. And the heritage tomatoes, I'll send you some. If I'm coming up to London, I'll bring you some, Graham.
Oh, fantastic.
So what do you think of the challenges now? Because there is a point, isn't there, where a business needs to expand. It's that catch-22. The business
Yeah.
needs to expand, but the finance isn't quite there to do the huge expansion that you want. What are you finding the challenges now, or is it getting
Well,
easier?
we've actually got some fairly big planting trials going on with some nurseries, and when we started the planting trials, they were very cynical because it's new and it's a pain in the arse and they have to change the way of doing things. But when they see the results that they get when planting with wool pots, and also water is a commodity. If you're a big nursery, you pay for water. So if you can reduce your water bill by 20 to 30%, then that's a big saving. And also, if you're particularly with herbs, if your herbs grow quicker, you can bring them to market quicker, so you save money on all the heating and energy costs of in your greenhouses. So we've proved that there are good commercial reasons to use wool pots. So we've got all these planting trials going on, and the next challenge for us is to persuade the retailers we're talking to that people really won't mind if the wool pot is slightly wonky or not completely straight. People really won't mind, because it's going to be beneficial in the long run, because it's not going to do any damage to the environment. In fact, it's going to benefit the environment. So we're talking to a number of retailers, and we just need one of them to go, do you know what, we'll trial it, and then we're off. But we've also got, we're doing all sorts of other things, doing bigger sizes, we're doing planting kits, we're doing a whole load of other products as well, just to kind of
make it easier for people in some ways.
Make it easier. And we're in Blue Diamond garden centres. They've been really, really helpful to us. We're in Hilliers. They've been also really, really helpful. But when we put wool pots in, like you said yourself at the beginning, people look at them and go, "What the hell are those?" So then we had to put display stands in, and with boards, and to show people what wool pots were and how to use them. So now we're having to do. We've just finished doing a video, a planting video, like a how-to video, that we're going to put in a couple of display stands, just to see if it helps people. But the most important thing is word of mouth. People go, "Oh my God, I've tried these. Have you tried them? They're great." And that, as you know, within the gardening world, everyone likes to have a good chat, and people are very they like to share their their finds and their knowledge and their experience, which is great, because and you see it on Instagram and Facebook and stuff the whole time. Oh my God, I've found this bug in my garden. What the hell do I do with it? And people go, "Oh, that's a pollinator. Leave it. Let it have a good run around your garden and do its best." So by sharing knowledge, sharing information, that word of mouth is very good. Yeah. You asked about shows. We're going to be at Gardeners World Live in Birmingham again this year, and we are the Gardeners World repotting partner. So people buy plants,
then pot on
in plastic pots. They bring them to us, and we swap the plastic pots for wool pots, and then you can take it home and just plant it straight into your garden. And that's great. That's great fun. It's exhausting,
Graham, if
But
I
it's
can help,
really
I'm more than happy.
well. Listen, Gardeners World Live, turn up, and you'll find our stand, and it will be four or five deep with a lot of. I mean, a lot of the people who we know. We did a radio show with the bearded growers,
Oh,
the Cotswold Radio.
yeah.
They are hysterical. Oh my God. And very naughty, but they're brilliant. So we actually being at shows, we get to meet all
Absolutely.
the people that we see and work with on social media. So it's a brilliant thing to
Well,
do.
I'm also a
Um,
trustee. My husband and I are also trustees of a charity called Cultivating Change, run by Sally Nye and Rosie. And their ethos, what we actually do as a charity is we give away free seed. Her husband, Dan, runs a company called CN Seeds. And every year we give away free bundles, I mean, quite substantial bundles to
yeah,
people because we're wanting to get people into growing things, growing communities, etc. One of the things on our target is to do a sort of festival. Now, I know Sally and Rosie have all sorts of connections now, like with the Skinny Gardener and contacts. So I'll certainly spread the word with them because I was talking to Sal actually about your pots, saying these pots are amazing, and even she was like looking at them. So yeah, we now have lots of connections with all sorts of schools, and it would be an ideal
perfect.
thing to to start to take it into hospices, hospitals, all those sorts of places that we're trying to
Yeah.
educate people on what they could do differently.
One of the lessons we have learned is you give away a lot of product.
I can imagine.
Like I mean, and actually the Gardeners World Live lot are brilliant. They're really, really, really good news and very helpful. And so all the plastic pots that we have at the
Mm,
end, and by the end of it, we had about 6,000 plastic pots that we exchanged. And we were saying, this is crazy. Every single plant that's sold is sold in a plastic
yeah.
pot. So that's why we approached some of the nurseries and went, wouldn't it be great if you supplied your plants in
In wool pots.
wool pots or even non-plastic.
Yeah.
You know, there are other pots around, but there are coir pots and bamboo
But
pots,
when you look
but
at the
the
carbon footprint, for example, of coir
terrible,
pots, everybody's
terrible.
promoting coir at the moment. And again, it's thinking about, I looked at, oh, these look great. And yes, they're environmentally friendly. And then you're going to go, hang on a minute, where is this coming from? And the carbon footprint to get it, to where you are, which is why I really
Yeah,
liked yours when I realized it's wool, it's helping the wool industry, it's helping farmers. That just
yeah.
all fitted with me when I realized, as I say, Karen, my lovely Karen, gave them to me, and they're Greenman Garment Tools and the family business there. And when she gave them to me, and I did admit I kind of looked because it was just a little label, and then went, oh, these are amazing. And I'm certainly in love with your wool pots, Graham. Hence, wanting you to do the podcast with me today to find out where did the idea come from. And obviously, it's
Yeah,
from you with a background, and then talking to your business
yeah,
partner, who kind of went, "Oh,
yeah.
actually, this might work." And I think yes, it looks like it.
And it's funny because all the stuff we've learned about them, like the oxygen and the water and that, we've learned after
Yes,
after we
it's
started the company.
it's
Yeah,
as a consequence of
we
doing it, isn't it?
yeah, but we knew they worked, and we knew we wanted to
Mm.
do this. But all the other good stuff, um, we've learned
As you're going along.
since then.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
and also we've learned. I mean, it's interesting. Like part of the research project we did, they said because when we said our wool pots are better for the environment than plastic pots, we were approached by a company who said we've read your press release, prove it. I'm like, what? They went, you prove it. So we then had to. That's why we teamed up with Lancaster, because we had to prove that wool pots were better for the environment than plastic pots.
Well, of course, because
And
the plastic
straight away,
manufacturers aren't going to want you to put them out of
no,
business. Let's be honest.
no, they
Yeah.
tried, but Lancaster went, well, okay, well, there's a 6-to-1 ratio. So for every one ton of plastic creates 6 tons of CO2.
Wow.
So immediately
A
that's
huge
that
saving.
you can see you get a huge saving. So when we go and see these, these big nurseries, we were talking to one guy, and he said, I put 60 million live grow herbs into supermarkets every year. And I went, wow, that's 60 million plastic
Pots.
plant pots in landfill. He was like, oh yeah, actually, yeah, we need to talk. But if you think so, even if those little plant pots weigh 200 grams, if 5 of those it mounts up, and then you times 200 grams by 60 million, and then times that by 6, so that's the amount of CO2 created just to create those little live grow herb plant pots. The planters do realize, which is why we're doing these trials now. We're also having to work out, sort of the whole automated planting, and so there's a whole process involved. But they are engaging, and they do realize that the missing link at the moment is a retailer brave enough to go, we'll try them.
So if we know anybody in retail that will can help you, who's listening, then
everyone talks about reducing their carbon footprint and zero emissions, and it seems a bit like, mainly, I know it's my company, but it seems like a no-brainer that someone wouldn't want to try it.
Absolutely. I totally agree with you. And, that's when I get passionate. You can probably see the podcast I do. I'm passionate about people who, well, how did you start this little business? What are the things, and how is it sustainable? And what are you doing? And so on and so forth. And that's when, as I say, I came across yours and then was following you, and I thought, I'm just going to ask and see if they'd like to do a podcast with me. So in terms of social media, then, Graham, where can people find you, and how can we track you?
We're on Instagram and Facebook. Our Instagram is we also like to have a bit of fun. So I don't know how long you've been following us for, but we love a good sheep pun. So you've got lots of lovely photographs of wool pots, and you've got some facts on the perils of plastic, but at the same time we'll have a sheep pun. So we had one recently on films, and we had my favorite ones were Sheepy Hollow.
I love it.
And the curious incident of Benjamin Mutton.
Oh, my husband will be all over this if I get him on it.
Yeah,
my sister's just come back from New Zealand after 38 years, so there's been an awful lot of sheep stuff going on over the last 38 years. But great.
Yeah, and of course what a sheep's favorite car is.
Go on, tell me.
A Lamborghini.
It's gross.
No, they are terrible, and we do apologize, but it's good. It's good.
So if
fun.
anybody
it's
can think of a sheep joke, you'd be open to hearing it then.
Yeah, we love a good sheep joke. Actually, we love a bad sheep joke.
A bad sheep joke.
Bad. That's it. You signed up.
So you're on Instagram.
And in Instagram, on Facebook, and actually exciting. We're revamping our website, which should be happening today. So that's www.wool-pots.co.uk.
Great.
So,
and we can buy direct off the website, obviously.
You can buy direct from there. And we're in Blue Diamond, we're in Hilliers, and we're in lots of independent garden centres as well. Independent garden centres are much more flexible.
Yes.
With their purchasing.
Well, you're not the one buyer who buys for all the nursery, really. Yeah.
Yeah, but in fairness, I say, Blue Diamond were great, and Hilliers, also fantastic.
So we're to look out, we're to ask our garden centres, do you stock wool pots?
Yes.
That's the one, isn't it? Is get enough people to say, excuse me, do you stock wool pots? And look at you, what are you talking about?
Oh, yeah, they're obviously mad. Actually, you can imagine going into these, quite, but if you work for a retailer, you have to be commercial. You can imagine going into these very, very commercial buyers for these huge garden chains and going, we're trying to save the world by knitting plant pots.
The image that comes to mind is a whole load of, and I dare I say women, but busy knitting their little plant pots. Yes. I think it's brilliant. I thank you very much for your time today.
A pleasure.
I'd love to have you back again, maybe a year's time, and find out where everything's going. Obviously, if you're at a show that we we come to, we'll come search you out. It's the same way
Yeah.
as the lovely Steve with backdoor shoes. Try to at Chelsea. Last year he was just swamped with people, and I hope that your stands wherever you are the same, and people come and seek you out. So we say it's
Perfect.
wool-pots, isn't it? .co.uk.
.co.uk.
Graham,
Yes.
thank you so much.
Yeah.
It's been lovely talking to you, and I wish you all the best of luck.
And it's been lovely talking to you, Jill. Thank you very much. Well, I'll see you in a year.
I'll always be grateful to my lovely friends Karen and Chris, who first introduced me to wool pots. And as I said at the beginning, I had no idea what they were, but having used them, I am completely converted to them. I still use plastic pots because I have them and I just don't want to put them into landfill. But any new things that I'm putting on, I will now be using wool pots. I'm into sustainability. Anybody who's been listening to me or knows me will know I'm very much now into sustainability and doing my bit to save the planet. They are so easy to use, and I was completely astounded at the difference. When I planted sweet corn, I remember that was the first thing I did, between the difference of the sweet corn in the plastic pots and those that I put into the wool pots. Well, now I know why. If you're a gardener, or of course, like me, have friends who do gardening and want to buy them a little gift, then I'd certainly recommend you head over to the website wool-pots.co.uk and buy a bundle to at least give it a try. And of course, you can follow Graham and his company Wool Pots on social media. And if you're at any festivals and they happen to be there, then do go over and say, you listen to the podcast, you heard him on this podcast. Thank you very much for listening. You have been listening to myself, Jill Harvey-Bush, chatting to Graham Hull of Wool Pots on GillHB and Friends. I hope you enjoyed the episode. I always enjoy these episodes, finding out more information. And if you would like to make sure that you get every single one of my episodes, then please go to GillHB and Friends and subscribe. And if you'd like to help that pesky algorithm, then a little comment is always useful as well. Thank you so much for listening to this one, and here's to the next one.